A detached garage in eastern Oregon, late afternoon. The light outside is bleeding from amber to gray to gone inside a steel drum bolted to a concrete floor. A concrete disc is turning on a central shaft. Listen to it. That hum is the entire soundtrack. Low patient mechanical, no roar of a generator, no click of a relay tripping, just mass spinning the way mass has spun since long before anybody bothered to write the word electricity. Onto a page, the solar panels went dark 40 minutes ago. Died the instant the sun slid behind the ridge. And yet the lights are still burning. The refrigerator is still breathing. Cold in the corner. The freezer is still holding its chill. And the man who lives here pays the power company $17 a month. 17. Not for the current running through his walls, for the privilege of staying tethered to a grid he barely touches, a connection fee, and not 1 cent more. Subscribe. Hit the bell, because by the end of this, you are going to be able to run one small calculation. The battery industry would give almost anything to keep out of your hands. Here is the confession. First, I did not believe it. Nobody on the forum believed it. Either a retired millwright outside Bend, Oregon, was claiming he had run his workshop on spinning concrete. For over 3 years, he posted shaky phone footage of a humming steel drum, screenshots of utility bills, reading 0 kilowatt hours, drawn month after month. The number held 000. Nobody could talk it away. So last spring, I drove 5 hours east to stand in front of the thing myself. And what I found was almost insulting in how simple it was. 255-gallon steel drums on welded frames sitting behind his house like discarded oil barrels, each drum cradling a reinforced composite disc, roughly 18 inches across, about 60 pounds of dead weight, each disc riding on sealed ball bearings on a central steel shaft, each shaft looped by a belt and pulley to a salvaged treadmill motor, the kind people leave on the curb, a charge controller, and a small inverter parked on a shelf above it. That was it. That crude little congregation of junkyard parts was powering his shop lights, a chest freezer, and a box fan for 3 years, not one major repair. I put my own clamp meter on the inverter, output steady current. The sun had been down over an hour, and the flywheel was still feeding the house, still turning in the dark, indifferent to the fact that the star had left the sky in 36 months. The only thing he had replaced was a pair of motor brushes, $4. 4. He did not invent it. He learned it off a maker's forum, and 3 other builders on that same forum had quietly done the same, one in New Mexico, one in rural Michigan, one up in British Columbia. Not an engineering degree among them. Welders, machinists, auto mechanics, men with grease under their nails who were not reading a product manual, because there is no product manual, because there is no product. They were adapting a piece of physics older than the light bulb, older than the battery, older than the grid itself, because the oldest flywheel on earth is the potter's wheel, Mesopotamia, 3,500 years before the Common Era, a heavy stone disc on a post. The potter kicks it once, and the mass carries the spin between kicks, that is storage mass at the rim, momentum, doing the labor. In the 1780s, in Birmingham, England, James Watt bolted cast iron flywheels onto his steam engines at the Soho manufactory, and the jerking, stuttering piston stroked smooth into clean, continuous rotation. Every textile mill, every foundry of the Industrial Revolution ran on energy stored in spinning iron. The whole muscle of the modern world turned on flywheels for a full century before a single commercial battery existed anywhere on the planet. In 1953, in Switzerland, the Oerlikon company built something that should be in every school book and is in none, a full-size city bus driven entirely by a 3-ton steel flywheel spinning under the floorboards. They called it the Gyrobus. It sipped a charge at each stop, 30 to 60 seconds against an overhead post, then drove the next stretch on pure kinetic energy. No fuel, no batteries, just a disc at 3,000 revolutions a minute, humming beneath the passengers' feet. Fleets ran in Kinshasa, in the Congo, in Ghent, in Belgium. Kinetic transit proven on real streets, carrying real people to real jobs. In the 1990s, at the NASA Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio, engineer Ralph Jansen ran a flywheel program meant to throw the chemical batteries off the International Space Station entirely. The prototype spun on magnetic bearings in a vacuum at over 40,000 revolutions per minute. The published data confirmed more than 100,000 charge and discharge cycles with zero measurable loss of capacity. Zero, a spinning disk that would outlive any chemical cell ever poured, and then before it flew, they defunded it in 2014. In France, an engineer named André Genestis had an idea so obvious, it hurts concrete cheap, dense, and castable into enormous disks. He showed that a pre-stressed concrete rotor laced with steel cable could match the storage economics of lead acid at a fraction of the material cost with a service life measured in decades. Meanwhile, in Union City, California, Amber Kinetics was dropping steel flywheel units into Hawaii and Taiwan, proving long-duration flywheel storage worked. At full commercial scale, both companies then went hat in hand for the same federal subsidies that lithium-ion manufacturers receive on autopilot. Without asking, without waiting, the physics was settled. In the 1780s, transit ran on it. In the 1950s, NASA validated it. In the 1990s, a French engineer proved concrete could do it on the cheap in 2014. So answer the question that should be clawing at you right now. Why can you not walk into any American hardware store and buy a flywheel storage system off the shelf? Because someone made very, very sure you never could. The lithium-ion battery market cleared $150 billion. In 2025, sit inside that number for a second. Feel what it requires. Cells engineered to quietly fail somewhere between 8 and 15 years. Cobalt torn out of mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo by hands that should be turning the pages of school books. Glossy commercials whispering the word innovation over footage of clean white boxes, while obsolescence is soldered into every unit before it ever leaves the loading dock. And families at kitchen tables opening a utility envelope, reading the number, and setting the paper face down because the figure keeps climbing and nothing they buy ever lasts. Now picture the law that guards all of it. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 wrote Section 48E, a 30% federal tax credit for residential energy storage, and the early language leaned hard, almost lovingly, toward electrochemical storage. That single tilt funneled money into lithium-ion, lead acid, and flow batteries, and left mechanical storage standing outside in the cold during the biggest clean energy boom in history. Install a corporate battery pack and the government hands you 30% back. Build your own spinning disk, and you get to fill out a much longer, much lonelier stack of paperwork. Go back further. 2011, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issues Order 755, rewriting how grid storage gets paid for frequency regulation. The new rules smiled on fast-responding batteries and financially punished the slower swing of a flywheel, and it landed on beacon power. Like a hammer, Beacon in Steventown, New York, had built a 20-megawatt flywheel plant, 200 individual flywheels spinning under one roof, performing exactly as designed. That same year, Beacon filed for bankruptcy, not because the physics blinked, because the tax code and the market rules were drafted by people sitting across a polished table from battery industry trade groups. Picture that room: the carpet, the bottled water, lobbyists strolling congressional hallways with slide decks full of factory jobs and domestic investment, every promise resting on one small demand: keep the word electrochemical stitched into every line of every incentive. The flywheel had no lobbyist in that room. The barrel spinning in an Oregon garage has no trade association and no chair at that table, and the dollar math finishes the sentence. A lithium home battery runs $8,000 to $14,000 installed and lasts 8 to 15 years, which means the homeowner buys it at least twice across a 30-year mortgage. A properly engineered flywheel lasts more or less forever, needing a bearing swap every decade or so. For $20 to $40, every flywheel that spins up is 2 or 3 lithium packs that are never sold. And an industry that needs your battery to die simply cannot survive. A machine that refuses to hear is the number I promised. A Tesla Powerwall, 2 stores, 13.5 kilowatt hours, roughly $11,500, installed, a 10-year warranty covering about 3,650 cycles. Do the division, that lands near 23 cents per kilowatt hour delivered over its whole life. A homemade flywheel, size for supplemental evening storage, costs $150 to $300 in materials. The disc does not degrade. The bearings cost $20 to $40 every 10 years cycle. It daily across 20 years, and the cost per kilowatt hour per cycle drops through the floor of anything a chemical pack can offer. That is the hidden edge, that is, the arithmetic nobody advertises. Let me be honest about the scope, because honesty is what separates a real build from an internet fantasy. One flywheel does not replace a whole house battery bank. It bridges the gap between sunset and bedtime. It catches the afternoon. Solar your panels made that would otherwise have evaporated into nothing. Strings several together for more, but understand what it is: supplemental storage for a solar home, not a grid replacement. If you rent, if you have no land, if you are reading this in a suburban kitchen or a fourth floor apartment, stay with me, because what follows costs under $300 and needs 0 permits in most places. You need one 55-gallon steel drum, $15 to $30 a steel shaft, 3/4 to 1 inch thick, 36 inches long, 10 to 22 sealed pillow block ball, bearings 15 to 25, structural polymer, resin 10 to 15, a carbon fiber reinforcement kit 5 to 10, a permanent magnet DC motor pulled from a treadmill 30 to 60, belt and pulley 10 to 20, a charge controller 20 to 40, a pure sine wave inverter, 30 wiring connectors, a fuse 20 total, $155 to $290, 8 steps, weld a steel angle iron frame to hold the bearings at a fixed height. Inside the drum, the shaft spinning dead center with 0 wobble, build a circular plywood mold with clearance on all sides. Shaft through the middle, reinforcement out near the rim. Pour a dense high-strength composite. Mix, tap out the air pockets. Cure it 7 days minimum until the disc weighs 50 to 70 pounds, mounted into the bearings, and confirm it spins free with no contact against the walls. Then balance it by grinding or bolting small weights onto the light side. Bolt the treadmill motor to the frame and link it to the shaft by belt and pulley. One motor doing both jobs, spinning the disc up when fed power and generating when the disc drives it back. Wire solar through the charge controller into the motor output through the inverter, fuse and meter in line. Bolt a steel mesh lid over the top and anchor the whole frame to the floor, the reinforced drum standing as your containment shield. Then spin it up during peak sun, cut the solar, and watch how long the disc keeps your loads alive in the dark. 3 safety rules you do not skip: the reinforced drum and thick lid are not decoration, because a spinning disc holds real energy, and you want maximum steel between it and your body. Check monthly for heat and vibration. And if a bearing runs hot, that is misalignment. Shut it down before it bites. Keep hands, sleeves, and loose objects far from the shaft and belt, and treat the whole rig with the respect you would give a running table. Saw 2 honest notes: friction bleeds stored energy faster than a chemical cell at rest, so expect 3 to 6 useful hours after a full charge. Perfect for bridging sunset to bedtime, useless for backup that sits idle for weeks. Round trip efficiency runs 50 to 65%, which sounds like a wound until you remember your panels top out by noon, and every hour of sunlight after that was going to vanish anyway. You are not losing power, you are catching power that was already on its way to nowhere. If this rearranged how you think about energy, subscribe and watch the next video appearing on your screen right now.